Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the OK Grognard Show. It is Wednesday, August 19, 2020, 9:30 a.m. Central in beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Welcome, Good Books. How are you? I'm doing fine. It's campaign discussion day, because that's what we do on Wednesday. And we'll talk a little bit about the 1E AD&D DMG sample dungeon in U. Well, we're going to talk about it in any event. It is a wonderful thing. I wonder if here, we can do this a little more. Oop, no, not that. Bigify it just a bit. Yeah, that's good. That's larger. Anywho, I don't need to be too prominent myself, right? Make myself even tinier. Shove myself in the little corner over there. It's cold in this little box. What am I doing? Got a Nexus shirt on. Good morning, Growlite. How are you? How are ya? Growlite. You been here this week at all? I don't think I've seen you. I gotta get you on that list for being here. There we go. All right. Very exciting. Well, you know, I'm looking at the page, because this is it, huh? That's the old dungeon. Very simple. Call it a level key. It's a legend, right? Stairs up, trapdoor, stairs down, secret trapdoor, door, stream, secret door, concealed door. 1 square equals 10 feet. That was essentially the norm back in the day. So there's some weird things about this dungeon, though. Some of the layout of it is questionable. I question it anyway. But I question everything. It's not like when this was created, the person who wrote it up and the people who looked it over and approved it or edited it or whatever, it's not like they had a lot of experience doing this. It hadn't even been more than a handful of years that more than a handful of people were actually running games. So please don't take anything I say. This is with as being a slight, as besmirching the character of these fine individuals who brought us this game, because nothing could be further from the truth. The you know, what I get to do armchair general wise is with over 40 years of hindsight. I mean, I got it in 79, right? So 41 years, right? That's a long time to get to ruminate on something and gain experience in relationship to, and be able to compare and contrast ways of doing things. So I have to say that there is no doubt in my mind that this would be different in and of itself if it had been created today, tomorrow, next week. Well, let's look at it anyway. A sample dungeon. We got the legend, wandering monster tables right up front, because that's a thing in first edition. We don't, we keep the action rolling. Pace, pace, pace. we make sure that there's always something going on. And part of how we do that is by increasing the challenges when things get slow, or when players are being careless, not being quiet enough, wandering around places where they should not go, where they have no business be. Well, of course, they're adventurers. They're going to go where they want. Anyway, non-crypt areas of this particular sample complex allow you to roll just a simple D4. Of course, you do the usual wandering monster checks. I think it's a 1 or a 2 on a 6-sided die. Maybe it's a 1. Maybe it's a 1 to 3. Depends on what's your party makeup, how large it is, how dangerous the area is. There are a lot of ways to adjust that and reasons to do so. But let's just say, if you roll a wandering monster, and it is in a non-crypt area, on a 1 it says 3 to 12 goblins patrolling from area 7 to 8. On a 2, 2 to 5 bandits. They are from areas 4 to 5. And then 3, we've got 7 to 12 giant rats. They're from all over. 4, 1 or 2 fire beetles. They're from areas 12 and 13. Fire beetles always keep in mind that while the rest of these, and all monsters in first edition, have improvision, and that includes these bandits, by the way, even if they're human, their eyes will have adjusted to being underground, because all monsters have improvision. But, so, if you were to change that, because you can change anything you want, and you could say the goblins have improvision, the rats have improvision, the bandits got to be carrying torches, but so too, also remember, the fire beetles are going to have those glowy orb things. So when you're running this as a campaign, keep in mind that on a long straight hallway, you'll be able to see those things way off in the distance, as far as the eye can see, so to speak. Crypt areas, on a 1, 1 to 2 ghouls. Those are from area 24. On a D, for a roll of 2, 1 third level evil cleric and 2 hobgoblins from areas 35 to 37. You'll want to have that evil cleric set up in advance and some spells chosen, because sure, you could look it over in a pinch and say, okay, well, in a dungeon, in this environment, these are the likely spells that a cleric of 3rd level who is evil will have chosen. Sure. It's easy enough to say that. 2 hobgoblins coming along. Now, just because they're evil doesn't mean they have to have cause wound spells. Greetings, Ink Dweller. They can be cure wounds. You can cure your hobgoblin buddies as an evil cleric so that they can fight longer and you can stay in the back and cower like a little cowering thing. An evil cleric might do that very thing, or use the hobgoblin so that he can escape, right? Because throwing a couple of hobgoblins into battle, hobgoblins will fight anyway, right? And hobgoblins, lawful evil, so this evil cleric, probably lawful evil, if they're going to follow a evil cleric. 3rd level, so it could be any number of races, but I think we're talking humans here. In which case, once again, you have to decide whether you're doing that automatic infravision thing or not. And that's a campaign choice. I don't know if I'd say that's a setting choice. It probably should be, but I think it's fair enough that with certain game groups that you're going to have, that's going to be something that they're either into or they're not into. The detail, the keeping track of all the rations, keeping track of who's got this many torches, how long they last, when they burn out. Do I light another one in time? Do I have to get out the flint and tinder and relight? Are we shivering in the dark while we're waiting for me to get that torch lit? Do I have a lantern? Do I have enough flasks of oil? There's a lot of implied, at least, record keeping. Lexfire22, how you doing? And you definitely want to make some decisions at the beginning of the campaign for consistency's sake, whether or not that's going to be something you are constantly keeping track of. Do you keep track of it as a DM? Do you force the players to keep track of it? Force. Ask. Require. Do you keep track of it in conjunction with them? And when they're not keeping track of it, do you mention it as they're getting low on oil, or do you just mention it when the oil runs out? What's the protocol on that? You have to decide that. You want to decide that at the beginning of a campaign, because, as I say, you want to be consistent. You want to make sure that whatever you're doing, they are not going to feel that you're being unfair. At the end of the day, you're not being unfair. Whatever you do is what you do, and that's just as fair as things are going to get. And no campaign is required to be fair. But if you want things to go a little smoother between you and your players so that you can pull the big surprises on them without them griping all the time, and they can, and maybe they have just cause to do so. But if you want to limit that so more of your time can be spent having fun and playing, then by all means, be consistent with stuff. Be upfront at the beginning of a campaign what stuff is going to be expected of the players in regard to these consumable resources. And be consistent with how this affects your NPCs too. So, monsters and villains, do they automatically have infravision if they don't normally have it as an NPC? If they're as a player character, if they are of a race that doesn't have that sort of thing as a player character, do they have it as a non-player character, as a villain, as a monster? So, figure that out. 7 to 12 giant rats, we said, on a 4. 2 to 5 skeletons, patrolling from Area 27. Now, that's an interesting word. With goblins patrolling, sure. They're going to do that on their own. That is something they do because they're paranoid, because they don't want to be surprised. Maybe there's a leader amongst them that is just also interested in making sure that they have advance warning of anything that might be out there. So, patrolling. Skeletons patrolling? That's an interesting word to use for skeletons because they do not have, they aren't sentient unless they're special skeletons. They're just mindless wandering around. So, when they are animated as skeletons, they can be given an order. If they are controlled, a holy symbol presented to them, a turn check made, they can be co-opted from their original purpose or from having no purpose to becoming purposeful patrollers from Area 27. Now, there's another thing in your campaign. Now, it might be a setting thing, it might be a momentary thing, but really, this is one of those campaign considerations because it's a consistency thing that can come back and bite you on the butt if you've just kind of off the cuff made a decision about it. So it's worth considering at the beginning. How much control do you have over undead? How explicit can orders be? Walk back and forth between these areas and fight anything that isn't me? That seems like a fairly straightforward command to give undead, mindless killing machines. And I don't think I'd say that's problematic if somebody wanted to use that as a player as well. So why not use it as a villain, evil cleric, non-player character, monster. And good for the goose, good for the gander. So there's your choice. How explicit do we need to be? Can we say anyone wearing a blue shirt? Well, how do they recognize a blue shirt? They can't. They have no eyes. So we have to consider how much can they sense. Anyone who comes this way, they recognize holy symbols. They feel its power. We know that's true. What if, can we say, anyone wearing this holy symbol, whether it's the physical manifestation of it through whence power is channeled, or whether it's a patch on a uniform, can they recognize that as well? Is that holy symbol, are all manifestations of that holy symbol palpably recognizable by undead? There's a good question. That's something you need to decide for your campaign, and again, be consistent about it. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's fire. Perhaps undead could be previous guards that patrolled an area, and that carries over. All kinds of options. Absolutely. Yeah, they may well be. I'm only throwing in that since they have an evil cleric in the crypt area as part of the entourage of monsters, my assumption is that the skeletons are patrolling in that area because of the dictates of that evil cleric. But nevertheless, even if I would think that evil cleric would be aware of undead in the area, in the crypt, must be, even if he's not the boss, he or she is not the big boss of this entire complex, there is the thinking that as an evil cleric, they would be aware, as a cleric of any kind, they'd be aware of undead in a crypt. They'd certainly know they're in a crypt. They'd certainly have to think, maybe there's undead in here. Let's go back mentally to where this crypt started. Obviously, it wasn't built as a ruinous, dungeony death trap, right? So it has to have been built as a interment place for a place to inter bodies for one religion or another. Some religious organization would have had to have taken charge of this monastery, making the monastery and the crypts beneath. And at that stage, they would not have been interested in having undead wandering around in all likelihood. I guess there's the possibility, if it's an evil monastery and an evil crypt, that anyone they put in there is controlled as a corpse to rise and wander to keep track of things, to make sure others aren't around. So there's an interesting idea, I guess. There's some campaign choices to be made there. My gut for my own campaign would be that something like a monastery where Crypts Beneath would have been an effort by a good religious organization, and that the skeletons and bodies that were interred within would not have been animated at that stage. So sometime between when they lost control of this monastery and the crypts, and now, whatever time we're at in the campaign, sometime in between would have been when those undead would have been the ghouls, the skeletons, would have been animated and set about the patrolling, as it were, the guarding, the whatever it is the undead have been ordered to do, commanded to do, is probably the word. But being that is the situation, then we have to decide then, if this has happened recently, is this evil cleric the one that created, animated these undead beings? And if so, what orders would this evil cleric have decided to drop on these particular undead? Well, all good questions. And when you're reading the rest of the adventure, there's a few other things. How's this evil cleric eat? And the hobgoblins, for that matter. What about the bandits? The giant rats have to eat something, as do the fire beetles and the goblins. So where are they all getting their food? Are they coming in and out of this complex? And if so, where are they going? Are they just going into the near countryside and hunting? Are they going, those that are human or humanoid, are they going into a local town, general store, getting supplies? And if that's the case, then for the campaign, we have to decide, can a cleric do that? Clerics can turn undead and or control them, right? Now, it's not something that a lawful good cleric would do. A lawful good cleric wants to either destroy or at least turn undead to get them away from their pals. They're not going to control lawful good, any kind of good, probably any kind of lawful, except evil. In my campaign, it would be an evil thing to control undead. I guess you could make a case for, we can't carry all these bodies, but we need to get them back to town to bury them in the sacred place of their ancestors. Let's animate them and have them shuffle along behind us. Maybe cover them up with robes. Maybe that's an encounter you have on as a wandering road encounter, is somebody who's not evil, just animated a bunch of corpses to make sure they get back to the proper place to bury them. So he's taken half a dozen corpses and raised them up, covered them in robes, wouldn't want to scare anybody, and now they're just following him back to wherever this temple is, shuffled along behind him. Now, more Gygaxian naturalism. Right on, Hobbs, no doubt about it. How's it all fit? Does it make sense in the world? It doesn't have to be accurate to the physics of our world, of a real world. But it does have to be consistent, and there does have to be some logic and order behind it in most cases. Some might say, well, the world can be chaotic. And you know what? In some ways, that's true. But we know from the real world that chemical reactions and the science behind physics and biology and all the rest, there's actually an order to all this stuff. So at the end of the day, order doesn't necessarily mean law, but it also doesn't mean chaos. These are constructs of cultural constructs that are choices made by sentient beings to conduct themselves in one way or another. Now, lawful neutral cleric, marching his 6 buddies, animated corpses, back to a temple. We run into them. What's the reaction there? Oh, don't touch my friends, he says. Does he lie? He's not good. He could say, oh, they're lepers. You don't want to go near them. Yeah, I know, they smell a bit. Watch out for that. But there you go. Things to consider as we're reading through the adventure. But I tell you what, we're far enough along in the day. And it's crazy, right? We got through the legend and the wandering monster table. That tells me that we're going to get a lot into this in detail because we're looking at it as a campaign. We're looking at how we would run it when the rubber hits the road, when the rubber meets the road, how the, as I said, DMG has a whole section called the campaign, but I break it down in several ways. World building and cartography is on Tuesday. World building is what you do to create a setting, regardless of who's going to play in it. GM tips, that's tomorrow. That's more mechanical. How do I meta with these players? What are the mechanics and how do they affect the game? Skull and Pants, hey. This is the sample dungeon starting on page 94 of the Dungeon Master's Guide, first edition. It doesn't show the whole thing in here, but it's a sample. It gives you some sample rooms. It discusses some of the things you should know and think about as a DM, and then it gets back to even more. It gives you a full dungeon. It's not all fleshed out, but we've got rooms up to 3, 4, etc., etc. First dungeon adventure, it discusses that and what you should do about it. Movement and searching, it discusses some of the mechanics of it. That's more almost GME tippy. But then it goes into detection of traps, hearing noises. It talks about doors, concealed doors, secret doors. And then once you get past that, with these basics in mind, let us return to the action of the first dungeon adventure, assuming that the abandoned monastery is merely a burnt-out shell with nothing but rubble and ruin within. The players spend only a few minutes of real time looking around before they discover a refuse-strewn flight of steep and worn stone stairs leading downward. And then it does the back and forth. DM and the caller, leader / caller, speaking for the group. We've got a couple of, what do we got, 2.5, almost 3 pages worth of that stuff. Then it gets into non-player characters after that. But this is the meat of what we're going to be looking at for the next week or two on Wednesdays. So we'll get back to that later on. I want to say to everybody here, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. If you're here and you haven't already, please do follow the channel. Make sure you chime in on the stream chat while you're here. We will get you onto a list And Hobbsy, I don't have you on the list yet this week, so I better get you on there. Ink Dweller, Skull and Pants, Lexfire, Grail Knight. Got all of you on there already. Neutral Good Books, you know you're on there. I talk to you, you're the first one here. Chime in on the stream chat. That way we know you're not a bot. And we do a giveaway every week. We've been giving away virtual Game Hole Gone badges. That's coming up November 5th through 8th. They're already taking submissions, so do yourself a favor and do them a favor. And if you're signed up, submit some events. Rest of the week, GMing tips tomorrow, building adventures on Friday, GM reviews on Saturday, rules retrospective on Sunday. We'll be looking at the Druids. Weekly news and announcements on Monday, cartography and world building on Tuesday, and back around to campaign discussion. If you're catching up with this on YouTube, please do subscribe to the channel and give us a little thumbs up, maybe some constructive criticism. We'd appreciate it. Thanks so much, everybody. I do appreciate checking in when you can. I know we do it every day. No one can be here every day. Except me, apparently. Sometimes I'm late. Anyway, thank you once again. Have a great day. This is me signing off. We'll see you next time from beautiful Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Bye-bye.